There are many beginners, and not only beginners, who make that mistake. It's very common. It's raining outside. Kinda sucks because I wanted to go out to shoot and I can't. Anyways, today I would like to tell you one thing that might actually save your work if you don't already know that. It's something that you should do, something that you should know and keep in mind when you shoot your B-rolls or when you shoot, let's say, in slow motion at 120 frames per second. Something that you have to do immediately after. Because if you don't, you might lose so much time. So now I'm gonna put my camera over there and I'm gonna set my studio lights and we'll talk about it after the intro. What's up guys, M50 here and welcome back to a new video. If you're new to this channel, there's one thing you need to know. I'm M50 and I make videos about cameras and gear, mostly using the Canon EOS, the Canon 90D and the Canon M50. If you subscribe, don't forget to activate the notification bell. That way you make sure you won't miss my future videos. But right now, before we start, hit the like button. Alright, what do I talk about today? Today, I'm gonna tell you something that might save your work, or if you're not a professional, it might save your time, because I'm gonna tell you how to avoid some terrible mistake. What is it? Alright, usually when we film, when we shoot in real time speed, we shoot in 24 frames per second. Therefore, our shutter speed has to be set to double. 48, but we don't have 48, so we set it to 1/50th of a second. Close enough. Then we adjust the exposure with the ISO or a filter and so on. Until here, that's fine. Then, if we want to shoot a slow motion and we want to shoot it in 120 frames per second on our Canon 90D or Canon EOS or Canon M50, we have to select from the menu and activate the high frame rate option, which set the camera to 120 frames per second. Then we go back to live view mode and we adjust the shutter speed, in this case 120 frames per second, double, 240, we don't have 240, so 250, 1/250th of a second. Then we adjust the exposure and we film, right? Yeah. Do you hear? That's good. Then, if you are unexperienced and you don't know this tip I'm gonna tell you, or this warning, when you wanna go back to shoot in real time, you just go to the menu and disable the high frame rate. Then go back to live view, you adjust the shutter speed, 1/50th of a second again, you adjust the exposure, ISO or with a filter, and you shoot. Then, when you put the file in your computer and you start to edit it and post, that part that you shot immediately after shooting slow motion looks weird. What happened? Well, there is something you didn't notice, or something you didn't know and you didn't pay attention when you disable the high frame rate. Is that when you do that, the camera doesn't go back to 24 frames per second or whatever frame rate you were shooting before doing the slow motion. By default, the camera goes to 60 frames per second. So if you didn't know that and you didn't notice it from the screen, you treated a 60 frames per second like if it was 24 frames per second, meaning even if you adjusted the exposure, the shutter speed was wrong. Because convinced that you were back to shooting in 24 frames per second, you set it to 1/50th of a second, the shutter speed. And you didn't know that you were about to shoot in 60 frames per second when you needed a shutter speed of 125th of a second. And that's why that piece of footage looks weird. So if you knew that, well, that's good. But there are many beginners and not only beginners, who make that mistake. It's very common. So in order to avoid that, remember, after shooting 120 frames per second, when you disable the high frame rate option, the camera goes to 60 frames per second. And if that's not the frame rate you want to shoot at, keep that in mind and change it. If you were shooting 24, set it to 24 frames per second. So that's the first thing you have to do after shooting slow motion. Set your frame rate to 24 frames per second, then adjust the shutter speed, then the exposure, and so on. Well, that's it for today. That's all I had to say, and I really hope this is useful to you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe if you ain't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.